Let's talk about cover songs and recordings. Some strategies around using cover songs, whether singles or on albums or EPs. To me, this shifts it from the live setting. I think there's some very different strategies here that you can be more intentional with. I feel like a lot of people probably just may release stuff that they've had in the live set and not really think about how those two contexts can be very different.
Yeah. Well, I think the first point I wanted to make is similar to the first point in the live setting, which is what are you trying to accomplish with this cover? Is there a theme or a mood that might be missing from an album? In which case, it can kind of do the same thing it does in your live context. You fill the gaps in a way. But you could also do it not so much filling in a gap as referring to the mood of the rest of an original album. Like if you've got some new big influence on your recording process, like you could do a cover by that artist that you're kind of mimicking in a way, so it can be like a reference point to the rest of the material you're putting out in a particular time frame.
Yeah, I like the themes and moods that are missing. Cover song, yeah, can be very complimentary. It can do a lot of things here, especially if you're looking at your album thinking, man, we're really missing this type of song and we don't have it. Cover songs are great. And yeah, I think in this context, that's like pulling out a cover song can really make the album feel more cohesive. And especially if you're releasing a single, then to set up an album and it happens to be a cover song, it can really help your fans understand maybe where you're going on your musical journey. Because we get the call all the time, this album sounds different than the other. Should I change my band name? No,
Right.
just look at how you can help your fans understand your musical growth and how you're changing over time. And covers can help fill in the gaps there.
Yeah, I've seen that a bunch of times where like an artist could have just dropped an album that was radically different from their previous one and their fan base could have turned on them. Or what I've seen happen is like they tease the new sound with a cover that's in that realm or something. So suddenly people are like invited to the party or invited along with your evolution. One other thing that covers can be really good for is getting on playlists. And we know there's a lot of sort of utility need playlists like acoustic covers or synth covers from the 80s or whatever. And you can almost engineer the song for those kinds of opportunities.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of people do this. We've seen people do it where it's really connected to who they are as an artist. And I've also seen people try to game the system where, yeah, you can go ahead and just do a bunch of random, like, for example, if I did a bunch of random 80s synth covers, it would feel like I'm just trying to tap into some trend as
Yeah.
opposed to it being an extension of my artistic experience. So I think you can use this in a lot of ways because there are so many cover song playlists around style, around mood, around genre, around artists, like Beatles covers. There's lots of those playlists. So you can look at those opportunities as a way to use your cover song recordings to speak to different audiences.
Yeah. Another thing I see a lot of artists do is just using a cover song recording as a creative exercise. And it could be that they want to know what it was like to record their favorite song. So they try to perfectly recreate it. I think that's always pretty fun to see, the ways in which they can't help but fail, but somehow come out sounding like themselves. Or, the other take we've been talking about is just taking it in a totally different direction and putting your own spin on it, but as a creative exercise. And then it could be a single. It could be a cover song you just put out on its own and it doesn't need to do anything bigger. It could go on an album. It could come out in conjunction with an album to refer back to an album, or you could really dive into this project mode and do like a tribute album or an actual collection of covers that are all themed in some way.
Yeah, I was thinking about how on one of our it was probably our biggest tour that we did where we were the headliner. We had this moment in the set and it wasn't really an acoustic set, it was more stripped down. We had a small drum kit near the front and I played a different electric guitar like a hollow body and we all were on stools together up close and we did this influences section. So we each talked a little bit about our musical influences, played a couple things related to that, and we went to each person in the band. So I was thinking recently, it might be fun to package that idea up in an EP or an album of like our influences. And so the point of that would just be more for people to understand more of our musical background, that things that have other artists that they may like, but also that have created the sound and the people that we are musically, and it's just like an extended story piece.
Yeah, that's cool. Then they can see like what you are an amalgamation of all these influences.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was interesting because, mine was that was the most terrifying moment in our set because I talked about how I had learned when I was first learning to play guitar, I'd learned this Phil Keggy guitar song, and it was like I programmed all this stuff on this sequencer. This is like 1990. All this stuff on the sequencer, and I'm an electric guitar player, and I don't need to get in the history of church and church music right now, but most churches at that time, a long-haired person showing up playing electric guitar was frightening. But I'm like, I'm not an acoustic player, whatever. My dad was a music leader, so long story short, I had to play in church every once in a while. And so I programmed this all out, and I would play this Phil Keggy song that was like electric, and it had a lead in it. And so on our tour, I would play a little bit of that completely by myself, and there was like 1,500 people in the room, all just staring at me, and that's like the most terrifying. And then we would break into a song as a band, but then our bass player, he's Puerto Rican, so we played a Santana song that was a big influence on him growing up. So it's like it wasn't like things that made perfect sense. Oh, now I hear the connection, but it helped people understand who we were musically, and you can then start hearing those threads throughout our music. Before we move on, the one last comment I'll make about what you said that I really liked was the idea of creatively inspiring you, like taking a song you mentioned, the idea of doing it perfectly, but also the idea of like, how can I take the song that everybody knows and do just the craziest version of it ever?
Yeah,
Or
yeah. That's
like
always
something
fun.
that's like you're not going to rewrite it because then it's not a cover song anymore. But the idea of like, I'm really going to try and make it my own unique take on this. And we also didn't mention picking songs. Is it oversaturated? Maybe pick a different song or balance between deep cut and noise. And maybe, like on a recording that if you're trying to use a cover song, the whole premise of cover songs is that they're known songs. but
Yeah, so don't pick
but
the last song on a obscure album by your
yes, which
favorite
is
artist.
technically a cover song, but it's probably not going to hit people as, hey, this is a song I know and I love their version of it. So that's something to consider as well.